and welcome to the Rejection Diaries Season 3 with me, Stuart White. We're now on to episode 4, where we're going to be focusing on requests, offers, and updating agents, which is always, I think, a very tricky and hard to judge part of the process. Often people ask, "What is the etiquette? What should I do when this happens? How should I go about it, etc., etc." So we're going to discuss some of those intricacies and discuss some examples of how to go about updating agents when you do get requests and offers. And from my point of view, the best advice that I've picked up over the last several books that I've submitted and had requests and offers on. So we're going to kick off today by discussing requests. So we talked last time a little bit about the wait. We talked before that about press and send and so on. So you've pressed send. You have waited patiently for the 60 or 8 to 12 weeks for the agency to respond, whatever their guidelines state on the website, and you are wondering, okay, what is next? So at this stage, one of two things is going to happen, or perhaps even more than that. You'll either get a standard rejection, which is the most common response when you send your work out. Everyone gets those. There's very few people that have never had a form rejection before, and that's usually just something that the agency have as a stock reply to those projects they're not further interested in reading more about, and they tend to be nicely worded. They also tend to be as neutral as possible, and usually have a sort of positive tone to them, regardless of what they really thought about your submission. And that's something which has obviously changed a lot over the years, because if you do a Google search for rejection letters, you'll find rejection letters from the 80s and 90s, or even before the 80s and 90s, which were a little bit harsh, and the person that has read the submission has been a bit more than honest about what they thought about the work and so on. And those obviously would have been difficult to take back in the day, but I guess when someone was just posting a letter out, there was less comeback, wasn't there? You couldn't just post immediately on social media at that point and say, "Look at the outrageous rejection I got." So these days, it's much more measured and neutral, the response you get. And I know from talking to agents, they don't love doing that. They don't love having to send a blank or a blanket generic form rejection to everyone whose work they are not considering any further. And a few things to say as well, obviously, about rejections, because that's the focus of this show. There's a myriad of reasons that they are probably going to send you the form rejection. Form rejection doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that they don't think at that moment in time the initial concept and idea and opening pages are enough that they could possibly sell that in the future. And the other thing, of course, is that they have so little time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But they have so little time that there is literally no way that they could request everything they think has potential. Even they've just got to be only requesting stuff that they think, okay, this is a wise use of my time, when I've also got 10, 15, 20 clients who actually need me to be chasing up royalties, or emailing foreign rights agents, or reading through the latest draft of the latest book and giving them some feedback and editorial advice and so on. So there's just so much more to their job than reading our submissions, which means that their time is precious and they can only request a few of the submissions that are actually sent to them. The other thing, of course, that can happen, and it's not for me. This is worse than getting a form rejection. Is when you don't get anything at all. I know that a lot of agencies these days do have on their guidelines that if you don't hear in 8 to 12 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks, or whatever it happens to be, that you should assume that you are not successful. And that's obviously a tricky one, isn't it? Because sometimes it can then be hard to get closure and move on. from the manuscript that you've sent out when you don't get anything at all. And I do understand that feeling, that angst that builds up inside you when that happens to you. But obviously, again, we discussed the time issue. They just don't have time to reply to them all. And for me, anyway, I've got to a point where I'm at peace with that, and I've accepted that's just how it has to be. Because if I was with one of those agents on their list as a client, I want them to be focusing on me and my book and my career and my sales to publishers. I don't necessarily want them spending lots and lots of time with submissions rather than working on my submission, which I've been signed for, and and they're working as a person who is to sell that book. I want them focused on my work. So I've come to accept that, and I think that's something that's important for all of us to do at as early a stage as possible, because it just means that when it doesn't happen, you say, okay, that's understandable. We all have it maybe in our own jobs or our own lives where we just don't have the time to do everything as perfectly as we'd like them to do. I know from my experience as a school teacher, that's, and anyone else who's a teacher will understand this. You just cannot do everything you would like to do to do your job as well as you can. So unfortunately, you have to just prioritize and miss things which are still important, but they can't be done in the time that you have allotted to you. This sounds a lot like I'm doing a job of defending agents here, but I'm simply trying to provide a balanced view on how it is for those of us sending work out, and to as we always should in every walk of life, put ourselves in someone else's shoes, and walk a mile and see what it's like from their perspective, and then that way we understand a bit more why we maybe don't get a response from some of the agents. So when you get a request, because that ultimately that's what we're here to discuss, and requests are, for those of you who've had them, they are what you are looking for. The goal of querying is that you get a request, and so when they come, it's a joyous moment. And one thing I'll say right now, which is so important for us as writers, and especially those who are at this stage of writing and sending queries out and so on, is we have to celebrate every little victory. And a full request is a huge victory, and actually it's even bigger now than it has ever been before. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. But if you do get it now, don't just as I do. So do as I say, not as I do. Don't say, oh well, it's fine. I'll send them the full, but they'll probably reject it anyway, or other such lines. You have to try, if you can, to view it as positively as you can, and leech as much of the joy from that email that you receive as is humanly possible. And if you do that, it does refill that well a little bit, and that creative well, and give you a bit more confidence and motivation. And even if it doesn't work out with that book, that request has done its job in terms of telling you, okay, you had something with this book. When you go to your next book, but you know that you've got a chance again, because you've done it once. You can replicate it again. And anyway, that's how I feel about requests, and I think that's good advice, to celebrate each and every one of them that you receive. Now, when you get a request, this is the most common question I think I get from people is, what do I do? Do I update the agents? Do I say nothing at all? Etc. Etc. And you'll get different answers in this depending on who you ask. Now, if you ask someone who hasn't queried for a long time, they will probably say, "Oh no, you don't update on that instance." However, as someone who has obviously queried for a very long time and is still, even this year, still querying, when you get a request, some agents actively state on their website that they want to be informed, they want to get an update. Others don't, but I actually don't think I've ever seen anyone who said, "Do not update me if you get a request." So, from my point of view, anyway, I will always update everyone who I've sent my work out to. Now, as someone who doesn't send their work out to a lot of people. Like some people go for a huge approach of sending out their work to like 100 agents. And good luck if you can find 100 agents who all are seeking what you're writing. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think you've got to go with what you feel comfortable with, obviously. But I think you've got to send it out to all the agents who are querying with you at that particular point in time. Now, even when you do that, some will reply quicker. You will get a much more rapid response from some of the agents. From others, you still won't hear anything. And I think nowadays that is more true than it has ever been. When I was querying, 2012, 13, 14, 15, I remember for the books round about then getting a few requests, and pretty much all the agents, once they got wind of a full request, would sometimes, without even reading the first two chapters, say, "Oh yeah, send me over the full as well, send me over." But that is definitely not happening, or not happening as much these days as it once was, based upon both my experience and from chatting to other people as well. And so that makes it quite interesting, I think. And one of the best bits of advice at this stage is to try not, and I know I said fill up the well of hope and optimism and confidence and motivation and so on when you get a request, but try not to go over the top in terms of the daydreaming thoughts that can come into your head, the fantasies of, yes, the agents are they're going to sign me now, and we're going to have my book out on submission within 2 months to all the big five publishers, blah blah. Easy to do, definitely easy to do, but try not, if you possibly can, to daydream too much, because, as I say, you get your hopes up, you get your hopes up, you get your hopes up, and then if they then reject the full, it can be quite a much bigger fall to go back down after that. And I think if you've gotten yourself too high, that obviously the fall is greater, and it's going to hurt a bit more when that rejection lands in your inbox. So yeah, daydreaming, I would avoid it. I again, I'm a bit of a pessimist personally when it comes to my what I think will happen in terms of my expectations and so on. I do keep it on the pessimistic side, but I also think that defends me a little bit, and shields me from maybe the worst of the feelings when rejection often does follow those requests. So yes, my best advice to you is this: do update all the agents. Do send a gentle nudge email just to say this. Um, try not to be too sort of demanding about it. Just simply say, as per your guidelines on your website, I'm just updating you to let you know that another agent has requested the full manuscript, or similar to that. Some sort of very short, polite note, so that they can then maybe receive that if they're looking at their inbox. I know that from speaking to a few of them, they're saying their inboxes are out of control, and they're very very rarely getting to them. But if they do catch that then will obviously speed up how quickly they are likely to read it, because they ultimately think that everyone has good taste. They they are aware of other agents and what they think might sell, and if they hear that another agent is really interested in it, they think, oh well, maybe I should be interested in that, because perhaps I can sell that too. Although I am very much speculating with that, so maybe maybe that's not entirely true. So that's requests. They are a joyful thing to receive, but they should also act as a catalyst to let other agents know about interest in your book. Because ultimately, and this is something that writers forget, they think that we should be these grateful people who should be, coming with our hands out and saying, "Oh, please like me, please like my book, Mr. or Mrs. Agent, please send it on to publishers," and so on. And that's true to an extent, but ultimately we are the creators of the work. Without the work, Agents don't have anything to sell to publishers, etc., etc. And I think you should be you should be confident about your work. You should be proud of your work, and if someone shows interest in your work, you should tell other parties about it so that other people might then think, maybe I should be interested in this. I think that's a good way to go about doing that. And of course, I'll probably now have agents, if agents do listen to this, they probably don't, send me an email saying you told everyone in my inbox to update me with a request, and now it's out of control. I hope that's not the case, but I guess my priority is to make sure that for all of you writers out there, you have all of the information so that you can make an informed decision for yourself. It's up to you whether you ultimately do update agents on requests. But that's my very long-winded and roundabout bit of advice on that topic. So the next thing that I wanted to discuss in this episode today was a little bit about what happens at the next stage, which is obviously much rarer. It doesn't happen to every author. It certainly doesn't happen often to people either, although you might think that you see an announcement about someone signing with an agent every second day on Twitter. The actual statistics and percentages of it are very, very low. I see some agents, saying they get 200 to 400 submissions a week. They are requesting maybe 10 to 20 full manuscripts a year, and maybe only signing one, two, or three clients from that particular pile. And when you think about it like that, those who are signing have somehow defied those huge odds. And if you get to this stage, and this is why I'm sort of totting up the odds. If you get to this stage, then you have done remarkably well to get the interest of the agents, first of all, to request a full, but then for them to read your full manuscript and still think, actually, this project, this book, this text is something I think I could sell. And if they get to that point, that's incredible, and you should be very, very, very proud at that stage. But because, as I was saying before, this is a professional thing, and it's your work, and the agents are also professionals, and so on. You don't necessarily have to take the first offer that you get. Now you'll have submitted to agents for a variety of reasons. Hopefully, mostly because you think they would be good to work with, and so on. But sometimes, and I understand this, people just send queries out to every agent, even if they think, oh, maybe I don't know if I'd work well with them, or maybe, oh, I don't know if they actually represent my genre well, or if they would represent my career well, etc., etc. And so, when you get an offer, it's important that you think more deeply at that stage about what it is you want, first of all, because that's important. It's not just about getting a book published. And stay with me on this, because I know that for some of you, you'll be saying, yes, it is. So if you are getting an offer, you've got to think longer term, not just about this book, but about what happens beyond that. And is the person offering going to be someone who will champion your work as someone who's an expert in that particular sort of niche genre or area that you're writing in? Do they have lots of good contacts at publishers and so on? Do they have lots of good recommendations from their current clients? And that is definitely something you should do when you're considering an offer, is to get in touch with all, or not all, some of their current clients, to have a quick chat with them. And a good range as well is always important here. Often, if you only contact the people who have sold a book with an agent, for example, they're likely to be happy or happier. Whereas if you get in touch with someone who has signed with an agent and maybe has not sold well on submission for maybe one book or two or even more, at that stage you start to get a measure of how the agent is going to be with you, how likely they are to stick by you, even if your book doesn't sell. And I know that I've heard of a lot of stories from fellow writers where agents haven't necessarily been keen to stand with a writer if the book they've signed them for doesn't sell. they say, "Oh, I don't like your other ideas," or "I don't think this is what working," etc., etc. Which of course can happen in every relationship, but you have to, and there's no way to know that in advance, obviously, with 100% certainty, but it's good to get an idea of that. And if you can speak to someone who maybe hasn't had the optimal experience, but is still working with the agent, then that gives you a bit of an insight into how they might be with you if if things don't go as well as you think they will. And those are the kind of questions and things that you need to investigate when you get an offer initially. There's a lot more to it, and I'll maybe talk about a couple more things in a minute actually. But the other thing that is kind of the main focus of what we're talking about today is what you should do in terms of the other agents who are considering your work. Now, an offer can be the prime catalyst in terms of uh, sort of igniting those other agents to read your work more quickly. It can have the opposite effect as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But generally speaking, when you say email an agent, say I've got an offer from another agent, they will get to your work much quicker, even if it's just to immediately reply saying, "I had a quick look, not quite right for me, and I'm going to bow out." And that can happen, and this is the flip side to obviously informing everyone, is that it can quickly eliminate quite a few of the agents quite quickly. However, if you didn't update them, they might not even get to your work before you then sign with other agents. So you've got to make sure that you give yourself all the options and update people so that at least the agents can make their choice. They can make their choice not to reply to you. Can make their choice to quickly reject you, or if they see promise in your work, and they can then get time to read it and to make an offer to you for your work. So it's important, I think. This is my opinion, that you do update all of the agents who are still considering your work. And at this stage, this is why back in episode 1, I talked about sending your query to all the agents who you think you would work with at the same time at the start. Because when you get to this stage, and I know it's a long shot sometimes, but when you get to this stage, it is much easier to update an agent and say, "I have an offer," when you sent them the manuscript 3 or 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever. It comes across as a little bit um, sort of second choice if you email them at the point of having an offer to say, "I have an offer," because then they'll maybe think to themselves, "Well, why didn't this person query me in the first place before they got an offer? And are they just using this as, I guess, leverage, or for some other reason?" Which you may not be, but it might come across like that. And for me anyway, that's why I always just like to send it to all the agents who are interested right at the start. So when I get to this stage, I can then just update those who haven't responded to me yet to give me an answer on whether they like my work and they'll consider representing it. So once you've done that, yeah, as I say, you'll get a cascade, a domino effect of emails back, probably. However, I should say that it's still not unusual for even when you update an agent with a full request with an offer from another agent, that they still won't reply to your query. And this is hope. I'm saying this in the hope that it provides some solace and some comfort for some of you, because I think that people worry if they don't get a reply, just off the initial query, that means something. And actually, it really doesn't, because, as I say, sometimes even when you're saying, "I've got an offer in my work, could you have a quick look just to see if you're interested in it?" They still don't have the time to do that and to give you a response. And again, totally understandable. I've come to accept that that's the way that it is operating at the moment, and it might do forever more. It might get better. It might get worse. Who knows? But the key point is that you might not get a reply at all. And so there is a double edged sword to updating agents about your offers. Often you just get a quick, "Yeah, that isn't really for me, but good luck," and all the rest of it in response to that. So yeah, at this stage, you've got an offer, and you're thinking, okay, um, you've gone through all the factors that I discussed earlier on. Are they going to be good to work with in the immediate term, the long term? Are they right for for me personally, they write for my books and my style of writing, my brand that I want to build and develop as an author. There is a lot of things to consider, and if you do update other agents, sometimes you get offers from other agents. I know one of my good friends. I won't embarrass them by saying their name. Got I can't remember. It was something silly like 6 or 7 or 8 agent offers. When they when they sent their work out, and they followed this approach of obviously updating the agents when they got the offer, and it turned out that they all loved it and they all offered, and she had to sit through uh, Zoom phone calls with all of those agents, and sort of try and somehow come up with who they wanted to sign with. It worked out well. The person they signed with, it turned out to be the right person. That they're doing great, and that's very good. But obviously, it can be difficult. I know other people who have had a choice, have signed with one agent, and later on realised that was a mistake and had to go back and contact other agents that offered and so on. And again, sometimes it works out okay. The other agent says, "Okay, I'm a professional. Although you didn't go with me the first time, I'll still take you on now." But in other situations, the agent might have moved on. They might have signed other people in that same spot, if you like, on their list. They might have a very now full list. They might be close to queries and not able to take any more workload on. So that's why making the right choice at this stage is so important. Why it's a thoughtful process. It's not just an instant. I've got an agent offer. I must sign with an agent, and it all falls under that same umbrella of, if the only thing that you're desperate about is just to get your book published, then there's a lot of other stuff that you're going to miss along the way, and things and signs that you might miss that maybe say, well, actually, is this the right path for me? Is this the right thing for me long term? Because just getting published feels like quite a and I say this with a hint of irony in it. Feels like quite a short term plan in terms of your career. And I know that it takes. I know one of my good friends who's just still waiting for a book deal that they signed in sometime early 2020, I think it was, or at some point in 2020, and they've still not announced it, or anything like that. So it can take a while, of course, but you've got to think beyond this book. It's a career, isn't it? If you just want to publish one book and you're out, then that's fine. But actually, I'm not sure agents or publishers would be delighted to hear that. You've got to be looking at a long term viable career in as an author if you're going to go down that route, and that means at the very start making the right choices. And as I say, I've just recently been through this whole process and had to make some difficult decisions in that regard, because again, it's easy just to say yes to the first thing that comes along, but you've got to think, okay, well, actually, I want to write, these kinds of books. That's my brand. That's what I'm going to be doing long term, whether I have an agent or a publishing deal or not. That's what I'm going to be writing the same stuff. Is this the best person to represent me long term for this particular thing? Or is there or am I better, like exploring other options, or etc. etc. There's a lot to think about, and it's important that at this stage you don't feel rushed into making a decision, and you do take your time, and you think, okay, I have this offer, but you know all the things I said before, what is best for me? And you have to make that decision. And this is the other thing. Agents are pros. They are really professional when it comes to all of these discussions. Don't worry about offending or letting down or annoying or anything else to those agents who may be involved at this stage. They are professionals. They understand that they work in a fairly commission based job. A lot of their income comes from the 15% they get from your book sales and so on. So they understand it's a professional relationship. It's not a friendly relationship necessarily. So you have to be honest, and you have to be quite clear about what you want as an author going forward. Okay, so that's I think a reasonable account of some examples and some responses that you could potentially give in response to getting a request or an offer from an agent, and the way to go about updating those agents and when to do it, and how to be sort of smart and timely about it, because ultimately you do want to get the best for you, and that might mean doing something you're slightly uncomfortable with. Uh, in terms of updating agents and so on. But one thing I will promise you is that in a lot of years of doing this and doing a lot of updates and nudging of agents and updating them on requests and so on, not once has any agent come back to me with a negative tone in terms of their me updating them. They've always said thank you for doing this. I really appreciate the update. Sometimes they say nothing, which is fine, but nobody has ever come back to me with anything negative to say about that approach. And so hopefully that will give all of you a little bit of heart if you feel like you have to have that particular approach for your particular situation. Okay, so that's a wrap on episode 4 of the Rejection Diaries season 3 with me, Stuart White. See you next time. May the force be with you.